Okay, hi guys. So first, before we get started on any of this stuff, let me just reiterate what Ryan said. Um, Inundate me with your questions and emails. Uh, that's what I'm here for. You know, we're here to support you, and absolutely, you'll never ever be bothering me by any means. So, in fact, I would rather be talking to you guys about ZBrush than you know, doing some of the other things that I have to do. It's one of the parts of my job that I enjoy the most. So definitely get a hold of me if you have any questions. Okay, so we'll talk about normal maps. Chat about normal maps. So before we do that, let me load up my little demo here. So how many of you guys are familiar with what normal maps are? Or have used normal maps in the past? Just give me a shout out. Somewhat. Michael's used them a little bit. Ryan, RGB equals XYZ. Never used it. Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool. Well, good to know. Seems like maybe you guys will be able to learn quite a bit here about this stuff. So, displacement maps and normal maps are two ways of kind of fixing similar issues. Similar issues, not the same. So, what does a displacement map do? It displaces, right? It literally will go in and displace the geometry based on the map. That means that it'll do things like change the silhouette, right? How is that different than what a normal map does? Anyone have any idea? And a normal map normals doesn't count. It's not a good enough answer. Normal map is like bump, but changes the edges. Normal map doesn't affect the silhouette. Vincent, spot on. Normal maps do not affect the silhouette. So a normal map will never displace geometry at all. And that's important because it means that normal maps are less expensive from a rendering perspective. And it also means that you can implement normal maps in things like games much more easily than displacement maps because displacement takes so long to render, right? So the trade-off there is that normal maps are more of a smoke and mirrors kind of thing when it comes to CG, right? It looks like it when you're looking directly at it. It can look like your high-res mesh, but from the side, if there's a lot of change happening in the geometry that the normal map is trying to cover, you know, it's you can run into some issues pretty quickly. So let's get in and talk about normal maps. So this is the guy that I had. I generated some normal maps off of this guy. This is just the Kotlenikov earthquake in your projects area right here. I just grabbed his torso and did some normal maps on him. So we know that a normal map is represented in 3 different channels. And let's go over to Photoshop here before we get too far into how to actually bake it out of ZBrush. Let's show you this. All right. So here you'll see that we have 3 different channels in our normal map. We have a red, a green, and a blue. What do red, green, and blue mean in a normal map? It's easy, right? And if you are a Maya user or a ZBrush, well, obviously you're a ZBrush user, it's really easy, right? Red is X, green is Y, Z is blue, right? So that's what these are all representing. This is deformation in on the x coordinates in 3D space, deformation on the y coordinates in 3D space, and blue is deformation along the z coordinates in 3D space. All right, so before we get too deep into what I have on this page, because you see we have tangent and then we have object, and it looks so much different. And what are these? What different is happening here, right? It's a pretty big difference in how the map looks. But we'll get to that shortly. First, let's go in and talk about how to actually get a normal map out of ZBrush. Okay, so first thing we want to do is actually find our normal map exporter. So it's just in our regular tool palette. We'll go down to our normal map subpalette. Right now I have this one on already because I already generated one. So Ryan talked to you guys already about what is adaptive and what is smooth UV, right? So those things we don't really need to cover here because you already know what those are, which only leaves us with a couple things to talk about in the actual export of normal maps. The first that I want to go over is smooth normals. So let's open our Photoshop back up again. I think these are a lot better to it's a lot better to show you guys in Photoshop because you can actually see what's happening. So this is our regular normal map from the torso. Just give you a point of reference. Here's the belly button over here, and then his torso wraps around like this, and this is the back and the arms and stuff. So you see this is pretty smooth. We're capturing all of the, here's his veins, got all his back muscles, everything that's going on the front of his torso. This is with the smooth normals function applied. This is the same map, all the settings are the same, except smooth normals is not applied. The biggest difference? Obviously, it's the low-res normals, right? This, I can see in here, I'm getting the high-res stuff, but I'm also getting all the low-res stuff too, right? All the stuff that's all the way down at my base that I exported from way down here. So I'm getting all these faces that are coming out, right, in my normal map. I don't want that. That's not at all what I want, right? What I want is for it to be nice and smooth. And that's what smooth normals does. It's going to smooth your low-res mesh, or your low-res normals. So always, generally speaking, this is always on for me. I have not really ever run into a situation where it didn't need to be on, except for with some hard surface things. But definitely when you're working with organic stuff and you're trying to export a normal map, you're going to want the smooth normal option to be on. Smooth UV and adaptive we talked about already. Let's talk about tangent space versus object space. That's what this button does. If I press this button in and it's highlighted, it's tangent space. If it's not highlighted, it's going to produce an object space normal map. So, not very many people know this, or at least not a lot of the people that I've come across can explain it very well. But maybe there's someone out there. Who knows the difference between an object space normal map and a tangent space normal map? Just give me a shout out in chat. Let me know. Anyone know what the difference is? Or guess what the difference is? Nope. Nobody? Okay. So tangent space versus object space normals are at the core a difference in how normals are calculated, and even more than that, the frame of reference that the normals are being calculated with. Okay? Object space normals, the easiest way to think about object space normals is that they're being calculated from the perspective of the object itself, the overall object, right? Tangent space on the other hand, these normals are being calculated on the basis of faces, right? So if you think of it in terms of, if you take a look at the object right here, our object space normal map, it's so colorful, right? And it's so colorful because all of those normals are being calculated bearing in mind the object as a point of reference. So on all the different sides and all these things, you're getting these bright colors because of the extreme change that's happening. If it's an object, you're getting extreme change across the map, right? Whereas with tangent space, it's only calculating based on every face. So for every single face, you have a neutral point. Every single face, you have a neutral point. That's tangent space normals. And then from there, any change that happens in that face on the high res model is going to be represented, right? So does that kind of make a little bit of sense? Just let me know if you guys are following me here, because I know that this topic particularly can be kind of hard to grasp. Means got it. Kathleen, so object has only its center at the neutral. I don't quite understand, Kathleen. Maybe you can reword. Ryan doesn't quite get it. So I lost you with the object's point of view. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. All right. So let me think of how I can describe this differently. The difference, Paul, you're asking what is the difference between what? Object and tangent space? Faces in tangent space calculate will start from a base of 0 for their verts versus object space uses the object as a neutral point. Johannes, yes, that's exactly it. That is exactly it. So let me push that comment through. Maybe that'll help us out a little bit here. Center of the object is everything, the center of the object is the neutral of everything rather than each face having its own neutral. Yes. Yes. Okay. So now if you guys are still kind of confused on how all this works, like I said, I totally understand. This is something that when I was first learning it, I struggled with it. And I know that I've come across a lot of students who struggle with it as well. So if you guys like, I've found some really good information out there regarding the differences between tangent and object space. And I'd be happy to send it to you over this next week. Maybe I can post it on the hub. Actually, let me just make a note. And that way, we can just be totally sure that you guys really kind of get it. Post normals. All right. Just make myself a note there. Johannes, please send, please send. You got it, buddy. All right. So, the difference between object space and tangent space normals. The next question that usually follows from that is, okay, well, which one is better? Right? I got tangent space and I have object space. Here's what my experience is. And the experience that of other people, of other of our instructors who I've talked to about this. It kind of depends, right? It's kind of like everything else that we've sort of learned is there's not really a silver bullet here, right? Some are going to be better than others, right? In my mind, for this, what we have right now, the object space looks a little bit better to me than the tangent space normals that we were able to get. So I might use that. A lot of productions will ask for both. Some productions, not all anymore. In fact, it's getting much, much less prevalent now, but some productions will even ask for world space normals, which instead of using the object as a frame of reference or using the face as a frame of reference, they're using the entire world as a frame of reference. So which way the faces are moving along the X, Y, and Z axis in accordance with the actual world that it's in, right? That's the issue with that is that once that happens, that object can never move. It can never move. It always has to stay in that, or always will stay in that same exact place, because the map is literally calculating where everything is in the world, right? In the world that's around it. So it can never, ever move. So you'll usually only get people ask for tangent or object space. And it's kind of up in the air as far as which is better. It usually depends on the situation. Okay, so let me go in here and let's talk about, I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Now you'll also notice down here you see switch RG, switch R, flip G, flip B. These are really there for different renderers. I've come across some renderers where you actually have to go in, you have to flip the G channel in order for it to work properly. Otherwise it won't look right. Things that are supposed to be protruding outwards look like they're protruding inwards. It's no good, right? So, and this is really something that you have to determine depending on the renderer you're using, and you would need to look at the specs for the renderer that you're using, and then just take the appropriate action inside of ZBrush. These are really just here almost as a courtesy, so that now I don't have to take this normal map, go into Photoshop, invert it in Photoshop, or invert one channel in Photoshop, and then re-export it. You can just do it all at once right here. So it's really convenient that way. Let's see, Jeff. What about like with Mental Ray or Modo for the flipping? Mental Ray, I know in 2013, I haven't looked at 2014 yet. I know in 2013 you did have to flip the green channel. Modo I'm not familiar with, so sorry I can't really help you there, but I can always find that information for you later. Okay, so that's kind of sort of it with the normal map. That's not it in terms of there's nothing else to know about normal maps ever, but it's a nice start, right? If you can understand that stuff, you can kind of understand the basics of normal map. Let's see, are there any other questions about normal maps that I can cover real quick before we run into Decimation Master, and then we can call it a day? Sure, it depends, but let's say you have a very smooth surface object and a very lumpy with fast curves surface. Would you lean more to object space for the smooth surface? Try and use tangent space for the more complex surface. It doesn't really matter necessarily. For me personally, I would go tangent. I always go tangent first, generally speaking. So regardless of how much detail it has, I'll go tangent first. Cindy V-Ray, I'm not sure. Jeff, when to use or what is switch RG? That's basically saying, all right, so red affects the x-axis, green affects the y-axis. Switch RG is just saying, okay, red is now going to affect the y-axis, and G is now going to affect the x-axis, right? So that's another issue where if you're not totally sure what's going on, you're going to screw things up real fast. So again, it's so important to check with the documentation for the renderer that you're using.